Thank goodness that it is still spooky season, because this might be the scariest project ever featured here on Dev Diary, the series where I try to make my own video games. Actually, today's project is less of a game and more of a tool? Interactive experience? Whatever you call it. The goal was digital pumpkin carving. So believe it or not, this pumpkin is actually randomly generated. If carving a white pumpkin isn't desirable, a couple resets should get a thinner build. And really, this entire project is just nothing but a ton of surfaces and masking. So when that pumpkin is generated, a slightly smaller variation is also generated. This is used as our quote-unquote canvas space, where the player will be able to draw, which for better or worse allows us to maintain a slight border around the pumpkin, helping to keep its shape. Kind of like if you enjoy the content, supporting me on Patreon can help me keep making it. Doing so can get you access to exclusives and even early access to the weekly Dev Diary videos. Now, with an established base, next came the drawing bits. Again, it's deceptively simple in that whenever the player left clicks, we draw a circle to a surface. Think of the surface as this invisible piece of paper placed on our screen. The game then takes whatever is drawn on that piece of paper and uses that pumpkin-shaped canvas we generated earlier to crop the doodle. In other words, we do some programming magic to make sure that the player can only draw within our pumpkin, and that draw data is then used again to create a bit of color depth, so you know, it doesn't look so flat. Now, we could have ended things there. The simple digital pumpkin doodle thing works as intended, but I wanted to try a couple more things. So we've got an options menu. First, let's talk about brush size. This thing can be quickly changed using the mouse wheel and reset to default by clicking on the option. And this does just as it suggests, changes the size of the quote-unquote carving brush, allowing for bigger cuts or smaller, more refined cuts. And speaking of cuts, this brings us to our second tool, the line tool. It kind of works like the line tools in most image editing programs, though it was like a last minute addition, so it's not as robust as the brush tool. Anyway, with the line tool activated, the player can click around the pumpkin and each point placed will create a shape based on those points, making it much easier to create straighter lines and shapes than freehanding it with the brush. Once the desired quote-unquote shape or line has been drawn, which yes also takes into consideration brush size, the player can reset the event with spacebar, allowing them to start another shape or whatever they want to do next. Like maybe turning off the lights? It's a simple visual change that turns those wonderful pumpkin doodles into virtual jack-o'-lanterns. Not the most impressive of features, but it was kind of last minute and I didn't actually know how else to really do the lighting with the setup used here. Visual effects are still kind of, uncharted territory here on Dev Diary. Anyway, the final option is indeed a clear option, allowing the player to completely remove their doodles. In other words, completely restart their progress without actually restarting the game and, like losing their current pumpkin. Which, on a related note, there's also an actual undo button. Whenever the player clicks, no matter what tool they're using, the game will basically take a screenshot of the canvas before any doodling happens. Then, if the player hits C, we swap back to that canvas, thus undoing everything the player just did. Now, I did mention that this is probably the scariest thing that I've ever done here on Dev Diary, and it's kind of true, because this is a blank canvas. I can write or draw anything that I want on it. Even something so heinous, so evil, so deprived that it could forever ruin my reputation as a content creator, a person, and general human being. And it could follow me for the rest of my life. Something like this, or this, or this, or even this. Now, purely because of YouTube's rules, I totally had to blur all of that. But you can imagine, and sometimes the idea of something so horrifying is worse than reality. Anyway, overall this was a great little experiment that I wasn't sure I could actually pull off. It's basically using a ton of knowledge that I've gained over the last couple of years regarding masking and the like, all focused into like one deceptively simple concept. And even then, there were a ton of potential issues that were overlooked. Like, for example, moving the mouse too fast will cause major holes in the player's quote-unquote drawn lines, which actually might be more of an engine issue. Like maybe bumping the game's FPS up may fix this. The line tool, again, is also very unfinished. No preview effect for the shape potentially being drawn. Possibly buggy response if the player tries to undo while creating a shape. a lot of potential headaches. Actually, I'm only now realizing as I'm recording this, had I made the undo feature more than one step back, I think a lot of these bugs would no longer be an issue. I know, I could be wrong. Anyway, I could reminisce and geek out about this stuff for hours, but I'm more interested to know what you thought of the project and what other features that you think are missing. So be sure to leave your ideas in the comments. Also, if you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like, and why not subscribe if you're new to the channel. But with that said, brings us to the end of today's Dev Diary, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.